Analyzing the Leger poll of September 13th, 2023. Presented by Michelle Sterling, Communications Manager for Friends of Science Society. 93% of Canadians don't care about climate change. Only 7% of Canadians do care about climate change. Hi, I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society. I'd like to walk you through this recent Leger poll that's been making headlines all across Canada and show you some of the inconsistencies and problems with the poll and with its interpretation in the media. Some people are dissatisfied with the way that I'm representing this poll, and they say that what I'm doing is a misrepresentation. But as we go through, I think that you'll see if I'm supposedly misrepresenting the poll, then what the media is doing is a travesty in terms of misrepresentation. But let's have a look and see. Have you seen the headlines? 7 in 10 Canadians worried about climate change, poll suggests. 7 in 10 Canadians are worried about climate change, link it to extreme weather. Only one headline refers to the elephant in the room, that 93% are worried about the economy and related concerns. But everything else, 7 in 10 Canadians worry about climate change and make the link to extreme weather. So here's the Leger poll, done apparently in conjunction with the Canadian press, or for the Canadian press, it's not clear. And it's supposedly about extreme weather events. This is how it looks when you want to go and download it. And you can see on that same page that they conflate climate change and wildfire with this image. To what extent are you worried about climate change? 72% total worried. 27% very worried. 45% worried. 21% not very worried. 7% not worried at all. And here's their methodology. They sampled 1,526 Canadians. And here's the key highlight, number 1 of 2. Canadians are concerned about climate change. And then they kind of sneak into the fine print here, despite economic concerns being considered the biggest issue facing Canada, 72% of Canadians remain worried about climate change. Really? Well, I don't know that that's what these numbers reflect, do you? If we look at what people are actually worried about, they're worried about inflation, housing affordability, economy, rising interest rates, healthcare, government debt, poverty, taxes, homelessness, rise in gas prices, and other. That all adds up to 93% who see economic issues as the most important. And only 7% of the people surveyed, that's 1,526 people, only 7%, or 106.82 people, see climate change as the number 1 issue facing Canada today. So how did we get those headlines? Isn't that something? And they also say that Canadians have already started to change their behavior due to worries about climate change. I suggest that that's because people are broke. 7 in 10 Canadians out of 106.82 people are worried about climate change. Really? So here's someone who objected to the way that I present this. They said maybe we're wrong to say only 7% of Canadians care about climate change, or that 93% don't care about climate change. This individual said, that in no way reflects your headline. You said 93% don't care about climate change, whereas the report simply states it's not their top issue. That's not the same thing, and you know it. You're deliberately misleading. Okay, fair enough. Complete and utter BS. The report says 7% of surveyed Canadians list climate change as their top concern. That doesn't mean the other 93% don't care at all. You're deliberately misleading, as is typical for the anti-science crowd. Okay, fair enough. But if we're misleading, then certainly mainstream media is certainly wrong to say 7 of 10 Canadians are worried about climate change. And they are also wrong to conflate extreme weather and wildfires to climate change. extreme weather is not climate change. This is from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the authority that governments consult with regarding climate policy. Climate change refers to a change in the state of the climate that can be identified by using statistical tests, by changes in the mean and/or the variability of its properties, and that persists for an extended period, typically decades or longer. Climate change may be due to natural internal processes or external forcings, such as modulations of the solar cycles, volcanic eruptions, and persistent anthropogenic changes in the composition of the atmosphere or in land use. So, extreme weather is not climate change. Extreme weather is an event or a season. But unless there are decades or longer of those kind of changes, that's not climate change. And in 2012, the IPCC put out this special report on extreme weather, and they found that little evidence that extreme weather can be attributed to humans. Also in 2014, Judith Curry testified to the U.S. Senate that also the IPCC AR5 report and the special report on extreme weather, that's this one, find little evidence that supports an increase in most extreme weather events that can be attributed to humans. And weather extremes in the US were generally worse in the 1930s and 1950s than in recent decades. So the IPCC Climate Bible does not attribute wildfire to human-caused climate change. So, Leger and Canadian Press, why do you? This is from a post by Roger Pielke Jr. Roger Pielke Jr. has been a climate science policy analyst for decades. He works closely with the insurance agencies on disaster reporting and statistical analysis. And in this particular post, he explains very clearly that the IPCC does not ascribe wildfire to climate change. The IPCC has not detected or attributed fire occurrence or area burned to human-caused climate change. Now, within the Leger survey, they also asked people, would you make some changes to your behaviors to fight climate change, even if this comes with a certain financial cost? Well, that would be futile folly, because as you can see in our report by Robert Lyman of the same name, Futile Folly, China emits in 1 month about what Canada emits in 1.5 years. So even if you spend a lot of money, put yourself in debt, walk to work, give up your car, go vegan, and don't have kids, don't fly anywhere, that won't make any difference to climate change. So let that sink in. Even if the entire country of Canada disappeared off the map, there would be no difference. And we have this table here from Professor William van Wijngaarden, showing that, for instance, the contribution in warming from Alberta is 6/1000th of a degree Celsius over the past century. So that doesn't seem like we should be making very serious efforts to stop climate change, does it? It looks like the Leger poll is actually a follow-up to this one that they did in June 2023, after we had a very active wildfire spring, as you can see here, featured on the front. But imagine, after weeks of hysterical headlines conflating wildfires and climate change, still only 7% of Canadians cite climate change as their top priority. That must have been pretty disappointing. Now let's see how Canadian press sets up their journalistic standards. First of all, they say that you should investigate fully before transmitting a story. So why are they equating climate change and extreme weather events or wildfire? Because the IPCC does not do that. Cite competent authorities. They could have cited the IPCC. Be impartial. It seems like they're not that impartial if they're giving preference to 7% of respondents over 93%. Stick to the facts. Yeah, please. Admit errors promptly and frankly. Well, that would be nice. Let's see if they do that. Public distrust of the media is profound and troubling. I wonder why. This distrust is fed by inaccuracy, carelessness, indifference to public sentiment, automatic cynicism about those in public life, perceived bias or unfairness, and other sins suggesting arrogance. Yep, I guess so. The Canadian press can help overcome such public attitudes through scrupulous care for facts and unwavering dedication to fairness. That would be great. And they also note here that the power of news stories to injure can reach both the ordinary citizen and the corporate giant. No kidding, and even a whole country. Every story shown to be erroneous and involving a corrective must be drawn to the attention of supervisory staff. Well, I hope people will draw this story to the attention of Canadian press supervisory staff. And how about Leger? Well, they say that their work is about quality and integrity, and they implement the most stringent ethical standards and principles. So how is it ethical, I ask you? How is it ethical to claim that 72% of Canadians are very worried about climate change when 93% of Canadians are very worried about the economy? How can they take just that 7% that's concerned about climate change out of 1,526 people and then claim that 72% of Canadians, or 7 in 10 Canadians, are worried about climate change, when 93% of Canadians are worried about the economy and related concerns? Doesn't seem very ethical to me. Canadian press also mentioned the power of news stories to injure. So what can be the harm of these headlines? Well, the headline leads people to believe 7 in 10 Canadians are worried about climate change, when in fact 93% of Canadians are worried about the economy. People are falsely informed that their actions cause wildfires, just the way those questions are drawn up. People become fearful of a climate emergency when wildfires are not a sign of climate change. People are falsely informed that extreme weather is caused by their personal choices. That's the conclusion you draw from those questions. And governments may falsely assume that 72% of Canadians think climate change is more a priority than the 93% who are deeply concerned about the economy. And the real damage? Well, precious public funds that should be used to address what Canadians are worried about may be diverted to stop climate change projects, which will not stop extreme weather, nor will they stop wildfires. And you want to hear an example? The federal government allocated $32 million to BC for fighting wildfires, but $32 billion collectively to Stellantis and VW to build EV batteries. $32 billion. Imagine 32 million versus 32 billion of your tax dollars. So this is 1 million in packets of $100 bills equaling 10,000 per packet. And then that's just extrapolated onto pallets of bills. Imagine. So the real causes of this year's extreme wildfires, in Alberta anyway, are 3 years of La Nina. You can see here in May 14th, this is what the fire danger map looked like in Canada. You can see it's extremely dry almost all across the country, but extremely dry in Alberta. And right after that, this what's called an omega block pattern of the jet stream socked in, and it didn't move. So there was hot, dry wind blowing up from the south over this very, very dry area. It was extremely dry because we didn't get any April showers. We had 3 years of La Nina, which means the ground was very dry. And when you don't get April showers, then the plants are slow to green up. And when they are green, they hold actually quite a bit of moisture, and they're more resistant to wildfires. And most of all, we have lots of standing deadwood. This is from Natural Resources Canada. This is about the pine beetle damage from 2012. So all these stands of deadwood have been standing there for a decade. Think of how tinder dry they are today. These are the issues that should have been discussed in Canadian press news stories, not 7 out of 10 Canadians. And fundamentally, carbon dioxide does not cause wildfires. So this is what you need. You need oxygen, you need heat, and a fuel source. That's the triangle for wildfires, or fires of any kind. And actually, people often use CO2 to put fires out. So 93% of Canadians don't care about climate change. Only 7% of Canadians do care about climate change. That's my interpretation of the Leger poll with Canadian Press. So if you care about Canada, join us on October 17th at 6 p.m. at the Red and White Club in Calgary at McMahon Stadium. We're going to be having our Break Free from Climate Tyranny Evidence Over Ideology event. This is our 20th annual climate science event. We'll have 2 featured speakers, Robert Lyman, energy economist. His topic is, when will climate policy hit the wall? And our second speaker, Dr. Ian Clark, Emeritus Professor, he will give us a reality check on climate and net zero. As you can see from the presentation, the climateers are desperate to push their mantra and their agenda. And the public is waking up and realizing that these climate policy measures, this new green economy, is destroying their lives, making life far too expensive for no benefit, as I showed you with the Futile Folly report. Even if all of Canada disappeared off the map, it wouldn't make any difference to climate change. I know that a lot of people are suffering, and if you can, please share our material with your friends and family. Look at our website, learn more about climate science and the implications of these energy policies on your life. We've got lots of YouTube videos if you don't like to read. We've got a blog with information from around the world, and we just like to keep people informed. We advocate for open, civil debate and full cost benefit analysis on climate and energy policies. That should be the norm for public policy. We shouldn't even have to ask for that. But that's the situation we're all in today. So thanks very much for listening to our presentation. I hope to see you at the Red and White Club on October the 17th, but if you can't make it, that's okay. Please do share our information with your friends. And by the way, ticket sales end October the 6th. So get your tickets now. Thank you. For Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Sterling.